Yeah.
So let's start the way we usually do with some questions from Nick.
Yes, because other than the word manga, I only know two things about it. And I could be totally wrong on these, is that they come from Japan.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. They come from Japan, and you have to read them backwards.
Yep. And it all depends on publication date. Basically, that started happening in the 90s. And sometimes if you get some collections from before the 90s, they will have taken the entire book and created a mirror image of it, reversed every single image on every page, so you can read it left to right. But it's actually really, really weird, and the artist did not like it because that was not the way they were drawn, and it ends up actually throwing things off in strange ways.
Oh, geez. Okay, before we get that deep down the rabbit hole, I guess we need to back up even one more step forward and just ask the question, what is manga? What is manga?
Yeah, manga's stuff that we would call comics, right? It's got drawings, it's got words, and it's published in Japan. It has a much longer history than comics, though. You remember in our original introductory episodes where we talked about history of comics, and we got back to like the 19th century, and even some kind of proto-comics from the 18th century. Manga stretches back to the 12th century in its most rudimentary forms. And it had a consistent kind of form by like the 16th or 17th century. Then it gets even more complex because by the 20th century, especially mid-century, it started to get really influenced by the West, particularly by Disney and by superhero comics. And because of that, there's mixing between the two traditions. But I think it's best to see manga not as a genre, which is what I called it earlier, but as a tradition. Just like U.S. comics is a tradition. And U.S. comics includes things that are like superhero comics, but it also includes things like Mouse, which are, much more serious comics where you're really thinking through like the